Trigger warning. This video contains references to themes of suicide which some individuals may find distressing.
When you work with someone with mental health issues, there's a lot that's built in and it's been hidden inside. If you know those symptoms and address that quite early, then there'll be good outcome at the end. I'm in health. I'm collaborating with a whole lot of people outside of health, like anthropologists. It's quite encouraging because you're not confined to that box. Weaving our Tongan knowledge with Samoan, Niuean, and other one. And if you go to the Northern Hemisphere, to Hawaii, so those kind of knowledge are when you weave them together, it's quite more solid and beautiful. Traditional healing and some of the Western new ones, they complement each other because some of those traditional practices, when you look at the reasoning behind it, it aligns well with what we're trying to weave into modern medicine.
Kia ora na katoa and welcome to Let's Get Pre-Sifik, a podcast focused on providing concepts and tools for the kete, or basket of knowledge, in dealing with suicide prevention through a Pacific lens. My name is Wiriamu, or Will, and I'll be guiding us through open, honest, and sometimes confronting talanoa about improving our mental health. Dr. Sione Vaka is a senior lecturer in nursing at AUT. In the early 90s, he was one of the first male nurses in Tonga, and after migrating to New Zealand, he worked for many years in the mental health sector. In 2015, he completed his PhD, which explores Pacific constructs of mental illness. Since then, he researched and focused on mental health, Pacific health, and Pacific methodologies.
Marabito, thank you for the opportunity. My roots is in Tonga and has different branches there from different villages there. So it's the village of La Paha, also the island of Lofanga in Neyafu. So that's where my mom and dad's from. So that's where I identify with.
You took a bit of a different branch. You came to Aotearoa and that's studied.
Right. Very fortunate to gain a scholarship to come and study here. And when we grew up, we always sort of aspire to further educations and to come to always hopes and dreams to come to New Zealand.
What is your study in and what are you a doctor of?
The study that I've completed for my doctorate is exploring constructions of mental illness from a Pacific perspective and focusing on Tongan people. So I've been doing that. So my PhD is around mental illness in that sense. That was done through Messi University. I still find it funny when people call me doctor, and I don't really use the title a lot, but sometimes people use it, and my son used to remind me that, Dad, you're a nurse, not a doctor. So, but when he's sick, I have to look after him. Yeah. So, but I think I'm still going through that stage, trying to accept that. From the doctor point of view, it seems to be on a higher status in the academic space. But in the Tongan society, I'm still like the young boy from the village I come from. So although I perform at the university, teaching people and telling them what to do and what I know, but going to my community, my family, my church community, I have to transition back, which is quite important in terms of navigating through these different worlds that we're in now.
When you ask someone what causes suicide, there's seems to be a million different reasons. And it's really tough when you think, how can we get ahead of it? And there's some themes that pop up, but I wondered if you had an explanation, from the years of studying.
If you worry about things as well and you don't look after it, your heart starts pumping, your blood pressure increases. And if you don't really look after that, it will get to a high blood pressure and can lead to a stroke, which is very serious physical illness around there. But one of the challenges, it's an area which is heavily stigmatized and discriminated. We don't only look at the individual and stigmatize them, but we stigmatize the family, the village, and associate with a whole lot of negative stuff around there. And some of the tools we've been talking about in terms of of working with Pacific people. And I think, when you talk about what causes suicide, why are we concerned about this? For us Pacific, relationship is very, very important. So in that sense, it's much more important for us to be with people. We build a relationship to make it warm and what we call in Tonga, mawhana. And once we create that space, then that person will find the right time and space to open up what they want to talk about. Because sometimes with the medical field, we're so focused on intruding our question in a very short space of time to say, can you tell us how you feel? Do you hear voices? Is there anything that's letting you down? With our Pacific people, if you continue asking that question without the relationship, then they will tend to just respond to your question. They may not tell you the truth. Because what they want to see someone on the other side that they can trust. I had the opportunity to take a team with me, psychosocial team. We went together to Tonga after the 15th of Jan eruptions and stuff. And some of the conversation in Tonga, that our Tongan people are very resilient through mental health, through mental illness. But one of the tasks that we do is just, we don't really go and tell us what you're worried about or this sort of stuff. We're not talk about the signs and symptoms or anxiety and all this stuff. And after that, we just hang around there and talk to them. And sometimes we sit at the kava pole and then share kava. But throughout the middle of the night, when they sussed out who you are, what are your real intentions, then you had people coming and talk about. It really affected me because I was growing this kava plantation, trying to harvest it in the 5th year, and now the eruption had destroyed everything. And then you hear how their voice is breaking, they're becoming teary, which is that sadness is inside them. So I think relationship in time is very, very important in terms of working with our people.
That's why if you look at suicide statistics, Pacific and Māori lead those in the negative way because that trust isn't there with the health system. That time isn't there.
That's right.
The Western way is efficiency, quotes.
Yeah.
And that's different to trust, isn't it?
Because for us, health is not about symptoms free of this. It's about maintaining my relationship to my family, to my mom and dad, to my brother, to my sister, to my church community. If I fulfill those, then it gives me in a better place, in a happy place. And when you're in that happy place, you have good mental health from there. If you're trying to complete a task without respecting your family and telling them what to do, it's not really a happy place, if that makes sense. And I mean, one of the things we always talk about, that our journey in a non-Pacific way, destination is important. You get from A to B, but for Pacific, it's about the relationship. No point getting to the destination and you lose your family behind. So it's about traveling together with them around there.
We're in Aotearoa, we're in Auckland, which is a melting pot. It's very expensive.
Very expensive.
Fast-paced.
So true.
And, you can think about high heart rates being the normal.
Yes.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, when you have a higher heart rate, higher blood pressure, that these are really symptoms of stress. They are
really symptoms of stress. So what we need to do is trying to make sure that we control that heart rate, and that's through it's all in the mind as well. Like when you worry about things, that's when you start increasing your blood pressure. That's when you keep thinking about stuff. Like at night, you can't go to sleep. You go to rest, but your mind is thinking about the bills to pay. You think about birthdays that are coming and all this sort of stuff as well. So it just races your heart until you have good outcome. I don't know if you follow rugby league, like this morning. Heart rate's pumping when Tonga was not looking good. But when they won, it's pretty good. Happy place.
And so I guess in that lesson too, it's okay for your heart rate to rise, but the goal is that it should come back down.
Yes.
And when you have this chronic anxiety, worry,
that's so true,
with high blood pressure, you might be able to say to someone that these are the building blocks for negative outcome. Is that fair to say?
Yes. It is fair to say, like the work that we have been doing in most places, some of our people are not aware of those symptoms, and they don't really see the correlations between mental illness and physical illness. And I think that's one of the things that we are so engaged is the specialty and expertise people. We have psychiatrists, we have this. We forgot that our body is just one. All this, I think we're starting to divide our body to different components, but they're all within one system. And you're right. If you know those symptoms and address that quite early, then there'll be good outcome at the end.
What's it been like for you to try and balance the Western academic with the more traditional side of you?
They do wrestle with each other. And I think before, and I think that's a transition within my work. I first came and studied as a nurse, very, very biomedical focus and things as well. Then throughout that to my masters and stuff, you see how it doesn't really fit our people. And then you shift at one stage to pushing for that indigenous cultural stuff quite strongly. I'm at the place now where I see that they need each other, but we have to find a balance around there. They do complement. You can't take one without the other, but you have to find a place to accommodate both as well. And especially because there was one time where I think, everything should be very Pacific, very Tongan. And then I start to realize that our population here in New Zealand, we have a high New Zealand-born mixed marriages and those diversities, which very traditional does not apply to that, but we need to find some tools or some way of incorporating all those different knowledges around there. So at the moment, I'm finding space to weave those knowledges together. My work, I'm in health. I'm collaborating with a whole lot of people outside of health, like anthropologists and other people outside, which it's quite encouraging because you're not confined to that box, but you're weaving with other. And one of the things that I find is weaving our Tongan knowledge with Samoan, Niuean, and other one. And if you go to the Northern Hemisphere, to Hawaii, so those kind of knowledge are when you weave them together, it's quite more solid and beautiful. So one of the, this is just an example that in terms of working with our anthropologist friend, Professor Devita Kaili from Hawaii, Professor Augustino Mahina in here. And well, I think there was a time we look at Tongan compared to Western and stuff, but take a step back and weave it with the others, and think Pacific before we translate it to English. So, like, if we think about people, the word for Tonga is kainga, that's people, You go to Samoa, that's ainga, that's mean people. You go to Niue, then the word goes kaina, which means home. And if you go to Hawaii, the word is kaina, which means land. So people, we are related to our home, our land. So it extends the whole idea. And not only that, it strengthens those stuff around there. So most of my work is like weaving it with other Pacific nations and stuff. And I think it provides a solid mat for everyone to sit and have the discussions around there. And I find it really, really beautiful.
One of the questions that I'm never quite sure, because I'm on my journey with it, is the role spirituality plays in mental health.
Our current mental health system have a primary focus on the biological need of the person, and there are some other psychological, sociological, then spirituality is the outside. But our Pacific people is the other way around. Spirituality is the core of everything, and then social, psychological, and biological is outside. So you can't really address a mental health of a Pacific person without addressing the spirituality. And you probably see it in terms of how our people start any event, or if you go for home visit, it's much more better when you start with a lotu, prayer, acknowledging the spirituality, because it provides that point of engagement. But not only that, the people see you, that you know what you're coming with, and they trust you. So that lotu, or that spiritual connection at the start, set things up for that talanoa, for that conversation to proceed. My apologies. I might throw in Tongan words because it's much more easier for
Please.
me to. So our Tongan words for spirituality is laumalie, which is sometimes, but it's in the loto inside. So loto is like refer to your. It's hard to translate it into English, but loto and also wongo. Wongo is sometimes what we hear or what we sense. So if you sense something cold, then your loto is cold. So wongo momoko, loto momoko. Wongo maafana, loto maafana. So if you sense something warm, then it will be warmth inside your heart as well in here. So the connection at the start with the spirituality, sense that warmth maafana. Once the person hear the loto, they have that, and it goes right to your loto and your laumarie, which just makes it much more warm, and then you connect from there. And again, contributing to someone who's feeling good. And once you have the connection, then they start talking about things that they worry about, things that concern them, and things as well. And it's good that way, because when they open up like that, that means they trust you. And you don't really have to ask those awkward questions about, tell me what's all this stuff, what's you. And you just facilitate the conversation around what they want around there. But I see spirituality as one of the key components when working with our people. And that's something, if we could enrich our health system at the moment, is maybe pump up spirituality to a higher level and address it there, because it's much more important in terms of working with our people.
What it also sounds like is it maps onto the science of maybe when you're calmer, you have better blood flow.
Yes.
You're warmer. And,
yes.
When you're stressed, you tell me from a medical standpoint, your blood starts going towards your core to protect it.
That's right.
So it sounds like these ancient approaches actually map onto current science.
Yeah. Traditional healing and some of the Western new ones, they complement each other, because some of those traditional practices, when you look at the reasoning behind it, it aligns well with what we're trying to weave into modern medicine.
You talk about spirituality in a way where I think most people can agree with that, but maybe sometimes it gets attributed to something else.
So one of the things that sometimes there's challenges in is with modern medicine, with hallucinations and things, like people tend to associate it with illnesses like schizophrenia. You hear voices and things as well. But sometimes from a Pacific or Tongan perspective, sometimes a young child hear the voices of their deceased grandparents who come and just visited them, and it's a little bit different around there. So I think it's quite important trying to make a good assessment and not to mix up the two.
That's right.
Around there.
And to maybe, as a default, as I'm thinking about it, attribute the positive things.
Yeah.
Because if we're talking about hopelessness, you can't touch or grab that, but most people could feel what you mean.
Yeah.
An empty space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's interesting too in Pacific, they talk a lot about a space, and that can be filled. The va, it's empty, and we'll fill it together, and maybe that will build trust. And so that's how I'm trying to think about things too. We know that, for example, positive thoughts are better than constant negative thoughts.
Yeah.
When you're stressed, maybe your brain is telling you, it's actually trying to protect you, isn't it? Don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But if you tell, you can become more anxious.
For Tongan and Pacific, we are not an individual. We are always collective. So how we identify ourselves is like how I talked before. Although I travel here as an individual to do my study, I wasn't feeling alone. Although I was lonely, but I always feel the presence of the people at home. And I think sometimes in our Pacific context, we are not always quite lonely, because that collective peace is there. You have your mom and dad to fall on. You have your uncles and auntie, cousins, which is quite close. And it's very close with what you like. For us Tongan cousins, there's no proper word to translate cousins. Like your own brother, you call them tokoua. Your first, second cousins, you still call them tokoua, which goes to show the closeness. There's no word as uncle. So all your dad's brother, you just call them the same word that you call to your dad. They are all your tamai. So everybody's come from that close unit. So I think that sometimes it's quite important to acknowledge that collectiveness because it closed the gap around there. However, it can be have some negative effect because that whole system may have a lot of expectations. And when you don't meet that expectation, then you start getting worried and putting more pressure. Like if you come from a good family, you're the eldest son, you are expected to put out money in every function and all these stuff and things. And our young people who are probably struggling with it needs to know that at the end of the day, it's okay to tell your family that you can't do that rather than having that thinking, oh, I fail my family. This is quite too much for me. Because if you start injecting that idea to your mind, then you go through that negative thoughts and go through that feeling of hopelessness and worthlessness, which leads to a very severe illness around there as well. So I think it's trying to acknowledge all the good part. Yeah, although the collectiveness is good, but there are some downsides sometimes as well.
The modern world is faster than the older world, isn't it?
That's right.
So we're not having time to chill out.
That's right.
To recalibrate, to let the heart rate settle. It's
so true.
on.
Yeah.
Emails, Facebook.
Yeah.
And so it totally makes sense to me that if let's just say on average, if Pacific and Māori have the highest blood pressures, having the lowest incomes, that's a contributor to stress. And then you add that into the busy world, a low trust medical system because I'm a box that needs to be ticked.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be surprised about where we are at.
Yeah. One of the conversations that I had with one of our Tongan elders at the Kava Circle, we're talking about the busy world. And during COVID, there was a whole lot of talk about the new world that we're moving into, like staying with your family and started sharing and all this kind of stuff. And the old man says to me, it's not the new world, that's the old Pacific ways that we used to do things, moving away from capitalism to sharing resources, checking on each other, just reflecting, going back to our own family and things as well. And I think COVID was not a very good thing, but if there's one good thing about it is stop, reflect, and reconnect with the family that we are. Because that time I disconnect with some of the people that were so close to me, but that opportunity was to come back and reconnect with them as well. I
remember seeing an article that talked about there's two current Western health systems for severe mental health, and one was tablets or SSRIs, I think, antidepressants, and the other one was talk therapy.
Yeah.
And I still think 99% of people don't know what talk therapy is.
Yeah.
But when I watched your TED Talk around Talanoa, that was an example of talk therapy. And I wondered if you could break down the meaning for all cultures.
Talking therapy is something very basic. And when someone is very unwell, all they needed to do is know that there's someone there who cares for them, sit on their side and then have those conversations. So Talanoa, from a Pacific perspective, where you go from point A to point B, is from a circular and collective way of trying to introduce to people who you are and sort of building that trust around there, which is quite key. Because once you go through that circle, then it will you gain the trust, and people are starting to open up to you around there. Tala means to tell or told, and Noa means zero, but I use sense of harmony or balance. And the one that I used to in an example is like a point A to point B in an individual journey. If you go from point A to point B, you say, my name is Sione. I'm here to work with you. I'll be your nurse today or something like that. So that's a very individual line where if you work with a Pacific person, you say that and they'll say, are you Tongan or Samoa? I'm Tongan. What's your last name? Vaka. Which part of Tonga you're from? northern part. So yeah, and they talk about, oh, I know a Vaka that I used to work with somewhere, and oh, that's my uncle or my cousins. Then the conversation goes on from there. So that sort of stuff is in there. So, and I also talk about, and I think our people were very smart in terms of constructing our ways of doing things, because Noah is not only point of zero, but I talk about it from a mathematical graph like X and Y, where that zero there combined the positive and the negative. You introduce an idea, like either if you go to someone's house and just put the idea there, they come from a positive stuff, like let's put in $100 for this. Oh, that's for a funeral. That's a good idea. Someone said it's a bad idea, and the conversation sort of circle around. Of course, through some heated discussion, some tears, but when you come to that zero in the middle, that's when people share from what's inside their heart here. So Noah is a very important concept for us, Pacific. A few have written it from a Māori perspective, but not from a Pacific. So, I mean, the Tongan word for diary is tohi Noah. So that's the book that you write, what's in here, your secrets or anything like that. So you need to get to someone's Noah in terms of that. So Tala Noah is that process where we talk about it. And if you think about it, applying it in mental health, when you work with someone with mental health issues, there's a lot that's built in and it's been hidden inside. And if you don't know the proper tools to get into that, you probably come back and write your clinical summary. There's nothing wrong, engage well, they're saying all this good stuff about you, and they're not opening up from what's inside here. But when you spend that time and that relationship with them, then all of a sudden it comes out. Yeah? I mean, the example that I talked about earlier was the work that we did in Tonga. People laugh about the volcanic eruption. Oh, it's so good, it's all over, that's nature, they come and go. But once you start talking and just they find their right time in space, then they talk to you. I was looking forward for that, to harvest that plantation, to get that money, pay for my school, for the kids' school fees, get those stuff. Now all that income is gone. I don't really know what to do. And you hear them sort of offload what's been on their chest there.
This is a preventative action.
That's right.
Because it's not festering.
Some of the Talanoa stuff that we have used in those spaces, it's quite useful because people offload and they feel better about it.
Yes. When we're confronted with living crisis, food crisis, that we're just bottling, that's hidden away.
That's right.
Yeah, something like that, Because I really want people at home, and even for me, to remind ourselves that the prevention tools, when you talk Talanoa, I like the idea that it's the talk or told. And when you mention Noa being harmony, talk harmony until you can gain the trust.
That's right.
To let the call it what it is, the true, the real bad spirit out.
And the reason why they hide it in there, because they're sussing out, shall I tell this person or not? Because do I trust this person to also could share my story with them? Yeah, so once they do it, when they share that, it's off their chest. It's such a nice feeling. Yeah, and that's the idea around Talanoa, is allowing people to say that. And if you think about it in terms of Pacific history, everything was told, oral history, written history came after. So that's who we are as people. Our history were passed on through those sort of stories, and they were told orally. Not only that, they were told through arts and music. If you ask an older person, what do you think about this? They start talking about the flowers and the rocks and stuff around those places around there.
Sione, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for going on this voyage with us. I truly believe that what's emerging in these podcasts is real things that real people can do. And not just from a Pacific perspective, but I like that these are indigenous foundations that are thousands of years old, and that, the Western science, I like how you're saying you merge with it, because it's not about, like, I'm exactly that. I have to merge with my two sides, or I won't conduct in life. So it's a little bit about knowing that the Western part of me wants things done now. But the Pacific part can say, not now.
That's right.
And we all have to work out where we sit on that continuum.
One of the things that I usually talk about is once you recognize the whole, get to the whole quite quickly as you can and try and work together on replacing, on how we can fix that hole, rather than sometimes we go there and say, who causes this hole here? Who in the boat do this stuff here? And start judging the hole and the people around that space. Let's not do that, but let's acknowledge that the hole is real and we need to do something about it, and we won't fix it. One individual can't fix it. Everybody will be contributing to that space. And not only that, we need to fix that because we need to continue with our journey to get to the destination where we want to go, and we need all the people in the boat to travel together. So to do that, we need all hands on deck to fix that hole and move forward. So I think that probably one thing is just to acknowledge that and have some positive ways of thinking and say, this is not the end of the world. We can fix it, and we'll continue moving on.
Just like we've done for thousands of years.
That's so true. Just like what we've done for thousands of years.
Beautiful. Where can people follow you if they want to learn more about the work you do, your research?
I've got, at the moment, I'm working at the Auckland University of Technology. Very contactable there with my contact details on the website. Or otherwise, I'm through you.
Sweet. We'll put the email up. Nah, all good. Dr. Sione Vaka, thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you think you or someone you know may be at immediate risk, call 111 or connect to the following services to get help. Text the Need to Talk Helpline on 1737. Call the Depression Helpline on 0800 111 757 or text 4202. If you would like more information on suicide prevention training and education, visit LEVAR on www.leva.co.nz. More support numbers are available in the show's description.